You guys are always working.
Welcome to Ray's Speakeasy. Most of you already know that Cynthia Wooden was one of the co-founders of the fair and has been a former member of the Oregon House of Representatives. I'm kind of picking up some energy from being around her and some of her associates that the real inside introduction is kind of like she never went away, but she's back. Is that proper?
Yes, indeed.
So welcome, Cynthia Wooden.
Thanks very much. It's obviously a pleasure to be here and a great honor. It isn't as though I've been gone for very long. I've actually been in California in the Bay Area for just 3 years when I was term limited as a legislator and other issues in life intervened. My dear friend Mona and Sandra, you know, I was sort of between people for about 5 minutes, and they introduced me to a person who lives in the Bay Area who I intend to spend the remaining days with. He wasn't able to relocate here, at least right now, and so I, in fact, left my life of, 35 years in Oregon, and moved to California. In a way, I was going home, although not really. I was raised in Los Angeles, and I think I'm a fourth generation Californian, so I try and keep telling myself that as I look around and feel often, even after 3 years, as a stranger in a very strange land. But there's a lot to do there, and what I've come to appreciate is that my path took me there for a reason, and it's up to me to figure out what my job is and what's important in terms of having an impact of who we are, wherever we are. And I'm sorry because I've been really struck all weekend. We are here to talk a little bit about the origins of the fair, and Sandra and Mary Kay and Wally are going to join me on the end of the stage because they're as much a part of the very beginnings of the fair and how we thought. And Cary, hi, and Cary Thompson, of course, also actually. We were all a part of what occurred. The person who's been missing this weekend probably the most is Bill Wooten, and as you may or may not know, Bill died in 1995. Sandra and I were with him in that moment, and he is very much with us this weekend. I can hear him yelling at all of us during fair time, as much as people come up to me and say things like, you know, I first met you in 1970, and you were screaming at me. And either Sandra and I will say, well, and why were we screaming at you? What was the issue? Well, I was selling illegal stuff and a blanket at main stage after hours. Oh, is that all? Of course you're out of here. And we will yell again. And or why did I yell at you? Because we tried to put plastic on our booth. That's a criminal crime, of course, at the Oregon Country Fair. And part of the basis of the fair was that we wanted an aesthetic and natural environment. We wanted a framework in which to express ourselves organically. We wanted to be as close to nature in an expression of an alternate economy and a new way of being political in the world as we could. And consequently, we wanted that reflected in the aesthetics of the space we inhabited for however long, that country marketplace based on the early times of the Renaissance. And as you know, the first name of the country fair was the Renaissance Fair, but an entirely different interpretation of the word, in fact, as you see it now. We went through some name wars with the Renaissance Theme Fair in California in the very early years, and created a settlement in which we did a transition of the name to the Oregon Country Fair by 1975. The other part of how we believed and what we were doing was, of course, an alternative economy, demonstration of an alternative culture. the symbolism of being in a place, in a natural environment with the most classic and natural environment that we could manifest in terms of that country marketplace. But we also had a framework of taking what we do here to the world, both as individuals and as an organization, as an event, as an entity. This was not just a family, the Fair family. This was just not an event that went on from year to year. It was our intention that this should be a movement, and a movement which has profound effect and impact not only in the Northwest, but on the people who come here and live their lives in different ways. Another part of the founding principles and view of why we're here today is, in fact, that issue of community. And Bill always used to say, all right, Cindy, break down the word community. Community. Common unity, Bill would say. And common unity means belonging to one another. It means having an obligation for taking care of one another. It means understanding issues that cross race and class and religion. It means looking for the highest and best of who we are and how we want to become. And as Krasner pointed out, beyond who we are in our own lifetime. The American public has a very short attention span these days, and so thinking about how to act in ways that project and affect a future that we believe in now is not easy for a lot of people, and staying close to who we are and one another is going to be the easiest way to maintain our patience, shall we say. And I've always wanted things to happen quickly, but you know what? It's been 33 years and there has been change. And now I think it's time for us to move into a new phase. Krasner and Ram Dass are absolutely right. How we begun really is important to now move into the next 21st century round of information, influence, and effect. And one of the things that we've talked about a little bit this weekend is what is the role of the fair in that regard, and how can we encourage the sort of institutionalized management and infrastructure of the fair to think about new ways to be and new things to do, and to take the influence and credibility that Sandra and Mary Kay and Wally and Cary and many dozens of people here today created in the beginning to new levels of influence. And some of the things that we've talked about, and I want Mary Kay and Sandra and Wally and others to join us here, but one of the and few of the things that we've talked about is looking at external opportunities. And Sandra pointed out last night that that's clearly happening. As Bill and Sandra and others did in the beginning of the fair, we used to have Chautauqua spoken word series. We involved candidates. We involved all kinds of people. We wanted those people, particularly running for public office, to be accountable to the people who believed in the values of the fair and to reflect that in governing. And we also wanted the people of the fair and the people who came to the fair to hear what we thought was the best thinking of our time, and to be influenced by that beyond their own experience in a momentary and magical way, as the radar angels were just telling us. So we've had some ideas, and we want to talk to people within the fair, and they seem really open and excited about doing more. Spoken word is now happening, and maybe in another year and the year after that it'll create momentum and attention and opportunity and have more people involved. They're doing a youth event, I think it's called Culture Jam, and I think that's significant. And we were talking about how the fair is doing a very good job of bringing people along in the fair organization to replace them. And that's not the same as you see in the world. There are political enclaves in which there's no one under 50 that is in attendance at any given meeting or speaker forum or anything like that. The average city council age in the city of Berkeley, believe it or not, is 71. Excuse me. There is a little leveraging there because Maudel Chirac, the famous and beautiful African-American woman who is on the City Council of Berkeley, is 92. So she leverages things a little. But the point is, there's no one on that City Council under 50. And we not only have an obligation to care for one another, we have an obligation to replace ourselves in the movement that we've created, and that the momentum that we know has had ups and downs over the last 10, 20, even 30 years, but now is at a point of new expansion and new importance and new vitality. So that's a good thing the fair is doing. But I think that we want to begin a dialogue about what could be significant. We've talked about opportunities for creating and managing speakers forums around the Northwest. There are political opportunities that this institution has to take advantage of. You need to think about how to influence public policy with some of the resources you have. And in our time and in our world, aside from what we do on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis in our individual lives, it means power, and power means money, and you've got both and can get more. So influencing the political arena through political action committees and supporting candidates or environmental lobbies or all of those things that are significant to the overall construct of why this event exists can be externalized. And as individuals of the fair and as an entity, the fair needs today to transcend itself. And we need, all of us every day, to be outside of ourselves and to know, in fact, that it's not all about us. And so anyway, I wanted to impart that, and I hope what's exciting to me and to the people who are here today, who were part of the early years of the fair and who made it possible to become, and hope that we can engender some enthusiasm for a round of ideas and to test some thoughts and to enhance and leverage the importance of the fair in the world to get things done. And certainly Mary Kay and Sandra and I and Cary, others here right now, have always been about getting things done and still do. So with that, Wally and Mary Kay and Sandra, you come up and sit on the edge of this with me so that we can talk to people and answer questions, or talk about stories that have been part of fair life and legend for decades.
Any of them are true?
Yes. Wally Slocum is a law school librarian and has been with the fair for since 1970, the first fall fair. Wally informed me that he's having a little slower time of it insofar that he is now 65 years old and gorgeous. Yes. Thank you, Wally, for being here. Wally started out by being naturally, the women were the final arbiters of good taste in the fair, at least in the early days. But Wally was the person who brought a kind of elegance and festivity to the fair by insisting on a kind of ethic of banners that are ritualistic through all major events of Europe and the world. And so he personally sought out the most exquisite banner makers of our time and commissioned banners for the fair from people like Barbara Neal and others. And he has for 33 years been the master and keeper of the banner life of this place that always makes us feel beautiful when we walk through the space. So thanks, Wally, for that. And the historian. If anybody ever needs anything in terms of the real history of the fair, he has the artifacts of who we are.
I have that old battered leather suitcase of bills. It's sort of like a carpet bag.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
It's somewhere in my living room.
Yeah.
Buried under layers.
And Mary Kay Liebig is now in Portland and was with the fair from the very beginning. She arrived in my living room in 1969, huddled in a coat from Los Angeles.
I was freezing.
And
it was February.
Mary Kay went on to be really the organizer of the fair in the sense of taking care of what passed for our record keeping and registration and formalized authoritarian way in which we tried to manage participation and the real accounts of the fair, and was always droll and kept us honest. And Sandra is, from another life, sister friend, and we figured out on Thursday when we were waiting in the sun for our credentials, about to faint of heat and wondering why they did not have the solutions booth on a database with flat screens, that we will have been Love Sisters since October of 1967, or 35 years.
Wow.
What happened? 35 years, and here we are today. So anyway, I'd like them to say hello, and Cary, please join us. Cary Thompson has been a part of all of this from the very first days of Eugene. He established the Willamette People's Food Co-op, has done remarkable work and continues to do that.
There's sit right here.
Here, Cary. And if you'd like to all say something, or just answer questions, or talk to people about their experiences and interaction with the fair. Oh, today Cary has a store, and what he does is he buys beautiful and important products from people who manufacture them in countries that have humane working conditions and fair trade, global exchange kind of products and goods in Eugene. And he's had that store successfully in the Fifth Street public market area for a long time, after the West Side markets. Here.
Okay, well, I started a few of the natural food stores in town, starting off with a food co-op by the university in 1970. Managed that, and then managed the Health Food and Pool store, which was in the Springfield Creamery in Springfield for a year. Then went on to start New Frontier Market here in town in 1973, and Red Barn Grocery after that, and helped start Oasis. So a lot of the kind of natural food infrastructure helped, which was part of the counterculture scene that we have here today. So, go ahead.
Sandra, I'd like to hear really what your impressions of this fair are. Or does anybody have any questions that you want to ask at this point?
Is Ina May speaking?
No.
Oh, I heard somewhere
Let's start this.
No.
Bye. Does anyone else have any questions or anything they want to say? Don't die on us now. Here, let me get this off there.
I wanted to say that one of the things that we proposed doing here was that so many people have fair stories that they like to tell, and we would like to, invite people up to tell fair stories. But that's not what this is about. The reason I'm saying this is that it seems almost universal that people have these stories of magic that happens to them at the fair. And I think it's just a real honor for me to be here with these people that know how to create this magic. They put this together and created something that was like, we don't live in a world of don't do this, don't think about that. Free to enjoy. You could go down all these paths, and they've really created a magic not only between us and them, but between ourselves. They've created a situation where that can exist, and I just think it's a real opportunity to see these people together. I'm real happy they're here.
Thanks very much. In many ways, event management is a science and an art, and if you're good at it, you know how to create the parameters within which people can have magical experiences by engaging with one another. And the fair was always intended to be not a participant observer event, but an event in which it was all participation. There weren't people who really came and then people who did the fair. It was an interactive intention all along. Sandy?
I think one of the things that, we've been thinking about a lot here, one of the most important things we ever did was have the courage to let things happen. Make sure that...
We didn't want to. No, we didn't want to.
We
don't know what they do.
Yeah.
We did.
We made it safe so no one would die, and delivered the services, and then let people do what they do. And that created this magic.
Sandra was saying last night, we were talking about sort of the natural life of events and institutions in the fair, and that there have been very distinct generational changes with the management and operation and feeling and work of the fair, and that it took a while for the current generation, so to speak, of people to learn how to really do it in a more complex and by necessity intensive way than we did, and that they've done that and they do it well, and that's why we view it as an opportunity to maybe think together about how to take some next steps in the expansion of the consciousness of the fair in the world. Can I say something? Yeah, except I want to hear from Wally too.
I just want to say one quick thing, how it's also this organization here contains passionate people like me that come to do this festival and are allowed to blossom into this incredibly magically fun events and magical moments year after year after year after year, where people are turned on and happy and having fun and can't wait till the next time to see you. And here we are, and you know, a bunch of us that are sort of characters and allowed to be characters. It's not easy to manage characters, and there's a whole chunk of us out here.
We've been saying that about you for a long time.
They've been saying
that. You can cooperate.
They've been saying that about me since day one. It's 30 years now, and it's pretty cool. The dynamics are pretty cool. But I just wanted to address that, because that's a lot of it. That's a lot of it. The power of you is the power of me to be me. You know?
Within some reason. Wally, will you say a few words? You may be the most silent at times.
Well, well, I'm 65. My voice is going out of my mind. I've actually always been on what you call the farthest perimeter of the fair powers.
Speak into the microphone.
There, like a lot of organizations, there have been plenty of, shall we say, backroom deals and little conferences, and then there have been the big meetings.
A little louder into the microphone.
Been the big meetings where decisions were made, but nevertheless could be considered coached decisions. I was heartened by what I've seen today, the last several years. I've gotten the impression that maybe the, quote, total hippie part of Eugene and Wayne County had perhaps sort of dissipated and aged and so forth. But I don't like dreadlocks, but gee, it's really great to see tons of dreadlocked guys and gals out here living the way they feel that they must in many cases. And that's one of the great addictive qualities of the fair, because for at least 3 days, for a large portion of the fair people, we get to create our own little city, and the only real law is that you just have to give other people the space to be themselves, so long as they aren't obviously hurting somebody or perhaps themselves. I was always impressed with Cindy discussing how, when people ask her how she did things out here and all, and I finally concluded that one of her great powers was her determined faith that if you encourage people to be their higher self and at the same time have faith in the power of good, that they will indeed finally grudgingly nudge over and do the right thing, to cop a movie title there. Even the people in the surrounding area, this geographic area, have finally pretty much come around to accepting the fair, and of course they have borne the brunt of huge traffic jams and a number of minor personal offenses.
Not to mention noise and trash.
Yes,
Sandra always said we would
noise
send
and
out the coquette Mary Kay to the neighbors.
Hey, we've had some bad neighbors. I will not go into the details for that. A year ago, I live at Main Camp, although this one powerful female administrator in this camp said, I don't know how Wally ever made it to Main Camp. And the truth was, well, I simply pitched my tent there before it became known as the Power Center. Main Camp's a piece of geography with a kitchen, but it just so happens that the most influential people have clustered around there, and that's where they live and make some of the decisions, of course. But this young man, who I would guess is about 21, said, it was in the dark, you're fumbling around, the lanterns haven't really come out, and people are rushing around. And for some reason, people were discussing public affairs. He said, that I can't find anybody in public life whom I would take as a role model. And I thought, haven't we hit bottom? In all of America, with media that cover every little nook and cranny, that it's indeed very hard to find any, at least male, whom we would take as a role model. The fair has never had a creed, and I remember during some of my years on the board, I kind of wanted us to draw up a list of principles of some sort. And, the board wouldn't have it. They were uninterested. I might as well have suggested, free raw octopus for a snack or something. They wouldn't have it. So I don't know exactly what the current fair elder generation is going to teach. Sure, we can model things, but the plain truth is that when you model things, you don't live your, shall we say, total moral and inner spiritual life all at once. Modeling occurs over a long space of time, and 3 days isn't a long space of time, and maybe even the 30 days that it takes to get this fair ready, that isn't a long time either. So I'm rather perplexed as to how we communicate to the younger generation what this fair was about. Cindy, let me pass this back.
Thank you very much, Wally. I also want to say that Wally has been one of the great patrons of the arts. I can't tell you how much time and support he's provided to musicians and artists, and nurtured them and fed them when they needed it the most. And it's been something that's been appreciated for a long time.
It's called art greed is what it's called.
Are there other questions or anything that anybody else? Yes. And what's your name?
Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Message.
Hi, Steve.
Nice to meet you. Has the country fair become more mainstream, more like the rest of the world, or has the rest of the world? You haven't been out in the world. Or has the rest of the world become more like the Oregon Country Fair since you first started it 33 years ago?
I think both, and I'll certainly let other people answer that question. When we first started the Oregon Country Fair, making granola in your own oven was radical. There have been cultural changes that are enormous, and we can see it reflected in all ways, in all paths of life. And I think that there's been an accumulation and a compounding of values of the fair that we see in society as a whole. And at the same time, the husband person, a lawyer from San Francisco, who's been to 2 fairs now, says, there is no other event like this in the world, and nor could this event happen anyplace else in the world. And I think so. I think the answer is yes and yes, or no and no, or both of those things. Why don't you? Do you have any thoughts on that, Cary or Sam?
Maybe not quite on this, but there is a movement afoot by Robert Despain, one of the former general managers, they're in the process of raising money to buy land in Washington State to create an even larger fair event area that is based on the fair here. So there's spin-offs, and hopefully that'll happen up there, and spread the word. And he has a lot of experience doing this fair, so I think it could probably make a go of it up there. They just, of course, need to raise a lot of money, which they're doing. And also another tie, just on a personal note, between Cynthia and I now live in the house she used to live in on Jackson Street.
Really?
Yeah. So
There's the shower. Did you fix the shower in the basement?
Never used it.
Oh, great. I'm glad. That's
a nice house.
Anybody else?
My name's Mary Kay, and I've been involved. I'm one of the early guys. 1970 to 1982 were my years, and most of my focus during those years was on practical and operational things, making sure that, you know, all the pieces happened in the proper order so that the event could actually occur. And I think what I took for granted in those early years was that we did have a set of guiding principles. Though never in writing, we all, I believe, understood what they were and what the fair was about in a philosophical sense. My wish for the fair today, along with you, Wally, is that there would be an effort to articulate what the fair actually is about and attempts to do. And I worry a little bit about what we're passing on to now, almost the third generation. Yeah, we know how to have a great party, but the fair is well recognized and well resourced at this point in time. And my personal belief is that there ought to be something bigger that emerges from this event than just an annual 3-day party. I see some stuff happening now, and I guess it's just my own personal bias that you know, if you know what you believe and you know what you're about, then no matter, you know, which way the wind blows, there's still some guidance there.
Thanks. I would like to say for the record that yes, it is true. Biker camp was created.
They don't have that anymore?
No, the night that they
grew out of it.
130 of them were on Highway 126 at 2 o'clock in the morning, held off by traffic, and we let them in the fair. We had no idea where we were going to go. We drove through the fair and picked a spot over there and put them down and hoped they'd stay there and mind their own business, and they did. And there are lots of legends and myths about things that have occurred at the fair. But as Sandra pointed out, our biggest job was to make sure that people were safe and that they were healthy and that the infrastructure of this city worked. And at the time, and for every fair, for at least the first 10 years, there was no carryover except some booths. There was no water systems. There was no power. The main stage was done by a gasoline generator. We had no capacity for building on the mechanisms that are necessary to operate. What did the Register Guard say? The 15th largest city in Oregon for 3 days. And it is. And it was an enormous task. And we had very little money, and we had, you know, the meekest of ways. We never had any gators. We had Dexter. That was a 1938 dump truck, or big truck, and that was about it. And so it was an enormous application of human energy and will to make it happen. And which isn't to say, you know, the fair has an easier time of it necessarily today, but boy, there are a lot more conveniences and resources that at least make it more user-friendly and less difficult on the staff. One of the observations that I've made, and I've met with some puzzled looks, is that the attendance at the fair has been capped for at least 15 years, or thereabouts. The fair attendance has not increased significantly for 20 years. And in that 20 years, one purpose of the fair appears to have changed, and it has become an event for the people who participate in the fairs, for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned earlier that aren't bad reasons, but the number of people that do the fair compared to the number who attend the fair has shifted exponentially. And one may think that that could be one of the issues that could come back into balance if we're talking about balance and pendulum of purpose and application and implementation of how this is done and what it means. Sam, are we done?
No, say something nice.
Shane. Sandra's been yelling at me all weekend.
No, I do think that it's important not to preach to the already committed. And I was always very concerned about the people who paid their admission and came through, because for them it was a very different event than for those of us who were fair junkies, loved the fair and loved to work on it, and had the camaraderie of working together on something that really brings you together. And but I always look at the fair as trying to imagine it from somebody's eyes who had never been here before. What are they seeing? And that's who, when you have the 501c3 nonprofit status, part of that was based on us being an educational event, and that means we have to educate, and that's one of the things that we wanted to do. And I still think that's very important. That somebody speaks for those people who are coming through that don't know what the message is, and trying to reach those people. And I think that's done. Eugene is, a very liberal, forward-looking city that lets people do things. So I think the fair has been important in that process.
We've probably run out of time, have we? No?
Sorry.
Well, yeah, they can sing another couple of songs. One of the things that's been, it's not as though I have gone to another planet or really have left my homeland, so to speak, but people have greeted me a lot, and as if I've been gone for a long time, and it's really been a short time. But I have to say that I have just been so filled with love for this place and these people. I can't look at an entertainer or a craftsperson or a kid runner or driving in this afternoon, the traffic people on site. The first woman was so gorgeous and was blowing bubbles at me as she waved me in. Every security person, when they check their pass, always says thank you. And the next set of traffic people, this wonderful young woman wearing a tiara, and that is the beauty and the art of expression that we as individuals find touching and important, and it is part of the education. But again, it needs to be, I think, further articulated. But as a personal experience this weekend, I can't tell you all how much I love you and how much I love being home.
I would hope that you could stick around for a little while. I'm very much enjoying this. I love this. But I did want to say that some of you may have the expectations of later on seeing Anime and Stephen Gaston. It's my understanding that they had a family emergency and weren't able to attend the fair. So if some of you are in expectation of that isn't going to happen. But I'm perfectly happy with what's happening for right now. I like this.
Well, I only wanted to say a couple other things. I really am trying to make significant trouble in California, and I'm doing a good job of it. Yeah, I very quickly threatened a lot of people. That was good. But I do want to say, as really an Oregonian and certainly someone who's been in elective public life for over a couple decades here, that the Democratic candidate for governor in the state of Oregon is Ted Kulongoski. Ted is from Eugene, actually Junction City. He practiced law in Eugene. Many of us have known Ted for over 30 years, and Ted has been a steadfast attendee and supporter of the Oregon Country Fair. For years and years, Ted has always come, even in times when he had serious gout and could barely get around. You'd see Teddy up on the Upper River Loop, and so I'd like the fair, or anyone who's listening, if you have an opportunity to care about the next governor of the state of Oregon, you have a friend in him and someone who's going to do well and do good, and support him and do what you can. Yes?
I just want to say, I want to thank you so much for all your bringing the parties to Eugene.
How are you, Kathy?
Did anyone bring up the fact that she introduced the Eugene celebration to this
No,
town?
we haven't discussed that.
That's something else you did. And when I was in Hawaii, I was looking at this museum in Oahu called the Bishop Museum, and they were talking about the Polynesian islands where the political leaders there, the way they get to be in office, so to speak, is that they have the biggest and best parties. And once they stop having the best parties with a lot of food, dancing, and singing, that they get somebody else to be. I'm thinking about Jerry West used to have pretty good parties.
Right, and Jerry was here on Friday, I hear, and he's writing for the Register Guard, and I think that's wonderful. And as Paul Krasner articulated a little bit earlier, and I was so pleased to hear from his heart that he lives with optimism and hope for the future, as I do. And there's every reason to believe that we can move forward, that we can progress, that life can and will be better. Just because there are a few people who accidentally got in positions that we wouldn't like them to be for very long, it is a short stop on the way to a larger and better world that we all believe is and indeed is happening as we speak.
One other thing I want to commend you for, Cynthia, maybe you knew the story, but I initiated the idea for Energy Park at the Country Fair back in 1982 when I was asked to be the first director. Well, actually, the person who actually got in charge of doing it was, you knew John Bartels, and John, when I initiated the idea to John Bartels, he took it to you, and you got it into the fair. So, like everything at the fair, nothing starts with one person. It's a movement.
Absolutely.
And anyway, I just want to say thank you for that.
And Energy Park has had a lot of people involved with it in various iterations, maybe even before that. Well, if do you guys want to sit here for a while, or are we done? Can we go eat?
My suggestion would be that we just turn off the mic, and if people want to come and chat for a little bit, we'll be here, and if you don't, then we'll go eat.
Thanks.
Okay. Are we still on?
Yeah, momentarily.
Yeah, well, I suspect you are, like I am, still aghast at 9/11. And, of course, I work in a library, so, I'm up to my armpits in quotes all day long. But I found one that is attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, and I thought it was really at least a beginning for healing on this painful thing. And it goes, the world is, she is supposed to have said, the world is filled with suffering, but also with the overcoming of it, end quote. So I will leave you.
Happy fair.